For most people, when they start doing a ketogenic diet, they have absolutely no idea what they're going to eat, and most people think that there's just not a lot of food choices when you're doing keto. I'm here to tell you that there's still plenty of stuff that you can eat on a ketogenic diet. So if you're just starting out doing this, or you've been doing this and you've kind of forgot about all the things that you can have and enjoy, I'm going to go over the meats and proteins, fats and oils. We're going to look at the most optimal veggies for this, cheese and dairy, and also there's going to be kind of a miscellaneous section on other things you might be wondering about and whether or not you can have them. So before I go over this list with you guys, I just want you to know that most of this stuff I'm trying to focus not only if it's keto approved, but the healthiest version of it, because you do have things like clean keto, dirty keto, and lazy keto. Now, if you can't afford the clean things, then at least just get the stuff that I'm recommending you to get, because there's no such thing as diet perfection. There's no perfect diet out there. So let's go ahead and jump into this, and we're going to start out with the meats and proteins. So the first thing on this list is going to be 100% grass-fed and finished beef. Now, the reason for that, for having grass-fed and finished, is if they're just grass-fed, that means they could have fed them grains for the last, say, 10 months of their life just to fatten them up, and that's going to mess up the fatty acid profile that's in the meat. And that's what I'm getting to with it being 100% grass-fed and finished, is you're going to have a lot less antibiotic, estrogen, and toxin concerns when you're buying this meat like this, because the cows are eating what cows are meant to eat, which is grass. Not to mention you're getting a lot better omega-3 fatty acid profile, because in conventional feedlot style operations like this, the omega-3 to 6 ratio is going to be really messed up due to the fact that they're fed a lot of GMO corn, soy, and grains. Now, moving on to the eggs, you want to try your best to get pasture-raised eggs, and not just the egg whites. You want to get the whole egg, because the majority of the nutrition is going to be in the yolk. Now, if you can't afford pasture-raised eggs, then at least go for organic. If you can't afford organic, like I said, just get the regular eggs. The reason for the pasture-raised is really closely related to the beef. These chickens are raised in very stressful conditions, and they're fed a lot of crap, and since they're eating that stuff and that's what's making up them, then it's going to translate to you when you eat them. Now, next, moving on to pork, and specifically we're talking about bacon here, because that's what most people relate to when they hear about pork or pigs. But there's a lot of other cuts too. You got tenderloins and some other things, but if you can, try to find heritage bred pork. Now, obviously that's not going to be available everywhere, so if you can't find that, at least get organic. If you can't get organic, then just get the regular bacon. But try your best. If you're just getting regular bacon, make sure at least that it's uncured, because some of these bacons, they'll use a high amount of sugar and nitrates and sometimes some other nasty things to cure the bacon with, and that's just not going to be beneficial for your health. And especially if there's a lot of sugar or sweeteners in it, that's not going to get you into ketosis, which is the whole goal of doing a ketogenic diet. Next up, we have chicken, and specifically fatty chicken. You know, the wing, the leg, the thigh. Now, you can go with the breast if you want to. You'll just have to add in extra fat to that, which is going to be next up on this list here in a second. But as far as chicken goes, chicken and turkey are going to be the dirtiest. So these are the ones that I want you to really try your best to get at least organic, if not, just like the eggs, pasture raised. If you're not getting at least organic, or even better, pasture raised, it's just like the beef. There's going to be tons of toxin concerns that are going to end up translating to you. Next up is wild caught salmon. Now, why wild caught? If you're getting farm raised fish in general, or even fish from other places that I'm not going to say the name of, there's a lot higher risk, especially if they're farm raised, of them having a lot of different toxins and a lot of crap because of what they feed them in these farm fish operations. You get wild caught, specifically salmon, you're going to get a very clean cut of fish with a good high amount of omega-3s in them. As I may have mentioned earlier, omega-3s are very great for anti-inflammatory benefits, and you need more of those than omega-6s. So piggybacking off of that, we're going to look at the canned fish. There are actually some very good options for canned fish that you can have, And the perk of this is most of these are really inexpensive. I personally buy a lot of my canned fish from Walmart, and I can get, for example, like sardines for 88 cents a can. I can get herring, which there it's called kipper snacks, but that's only like $1.18 a can, so very cheap. But yeah, you've got sardines, herring, you've got mackerel, anchovies, and there's some other ones too, but as I said, they got a good omega-3 profile, and they're actually not that high in toxins, either though they are canned. Next thing on the list is going to be shellfish, and we're talking like oysters, lobster, which I know some people can't afford that. Then you got crab meat, and please note that if you're getting crab meat, do not get imitation crab. That is not real crab meat, and they usually add a lot of carbs to it through a lot of ingredients that have nothing to do with crab. But you got those, and even like mussels, but shellfish are very high in a lot of different trace minerals like zinc, selenium, and iodine. So those are definitely a good one that you should try to incorporate, eating at least a few times a week. I will be mentioning a few other meats in the miscellaneous section later on in this, because they do have some special caveats to them. But now we're going to move on to the fats and oils. Now first up is going to be grass-fed butter. I've done told you why you need to get grass-fed, but there's some good brands like Kerrygold, you've got Vital Farms, and a lot of others. But at bare minimum, at least get organic. Now next up is olive oil. Now olive oil, do not cook with olive oil, because olive oil is a very low smoke point, and even just a small amount of heat, especially cooking, is going to make it oxidize very rapidly, and basically you're going to be eating rancid oil, which is not good for you at all. Then we have avocado oil. Now this is what I personally use to cook with, and it has a much higher smoke point, so you're not going to risk oxidizing it when you're cooking with it. And the cool thing about avocado oil and avocados is they're actually technically omega-6, but they're a different kind of omega-6 that's actually anti-inflammatory. And avocados and avocado oil have something called PPAR, and basically what that does is it causes a rise in your body heat, which is going to result in more fat burning, just to put it in short terms. And then there's coconut oil. This is really high in lauric acid, which has a lot of good powerful effects. Then we got ghee, and ghee is clarified butter. Basically there's virtually no lactose, and all the casein proteins have been removed, and it's just straight butter fat. So this will be beneficial for any of you that are lactose intolerant, or you notice when you eat a lot of dairy like cheese or butter that you tend to get a little inflammation or bloated. This stuff is not going to end up causing that. Then we have MCT oil. Be very careful with this stuff, but you can add a little bit to your food or your coffee. There's a lot of people that like to add it to what's called bulletproof coffee. But basically this stands for medium chain triglycerides, and basically they rapidly turn into ketones to give you a quick boost of energy, which you may need when you're first starting out on keto, because you may have those energy slumps as your body's getting more used to burning ketones for fuel. Now the next one is optional, and that's macadamia nut oil. Now this is high in something that you may not have heard of called omega-7. It's high in omega-7s and 9s, but that's a long story for another video. Just know that omega-7s do have a really good benefit for your health. And the reason I say it's optional is because macadamia nuts in general are very expensive, and macadamia nut oil also is very expensive. So now we're going to move on to the cheese and dairy. Now first up is going to be Parmesan and Romano. Now, the good thing about this is it's aged longer, it's lower in lactose and the casein proteins I was talking about earlier, so it's generally going to be healthier for you. I personally use Parmesan cheese a lot when I'm cooking my foods. Then you have aged white cheddar, but you want to make sure when you're getting any kind of other regular cheese that it's coming once again from grass-fed cows. And the reason for aged is because the more time that it sits aging, the less lactose and casein is in it, just like the Parmesan and Romano I was talking about. So in general, it's just going to be better for you. And obviously, do not go for any kind of processed cheap cheeses, because some of those ain't even actually cheese, and they got a lot of nasty stuff in them. Now we're going to move on to goat cheese. So goat cheese ain't for everybody, but the good thing about it is that once again it's less inflammatory because it's completely different kind of proteins that are in it, unlike the casein proteins I was talking about with the other cheeses and dairy. And also goat cheese is a lot softer, and I've seen people actually use it as a spread. Then we got heavy whipping cream. Now heavy whipping cream you got to really be careful with. Make sure if you can, and you can afford it, get it organic. Also check and make sure that it doesn't have carrageenan or emulsifiers in it. Carrageenan is a type of red seaweed, and it's actually been shown in studies to be fairly inflammatory, and they've actually used it in studies where they study inflammation to induce inflammation. So be conscious and watch out for that. Make sure it ain't in it. Then next we have cream cheese. Now this, you just want to check the ingredients list. You want to make sure it doesn't have any added sugars or any crap added to it. Then cottage cheese. Now check the back of it once again. Look for any hidden sugars or any crap that they've added to it, and just make sure that it's low sugar content. A lot of cottage cheeses I've seen have a higher amount of sugar and carbs in them that they've added in externally, so just make sure you check the back. Now we're gonna move into the optimal veggies that you can have. First up on the list, we got cauliflower. Most of you probably know that or have heard of people using cauliflower on keto and having it like riced or mashed. So it's a great replacement for like mashed potatoes or obviously rice. And also the cool thing is that cauliflower is in the clean 25, so you don't have to worry about buying it organic because there shouldn't be really many pesticide concerns whatsoever. Then next is broccoli. It has a lot of anti-estrogen properties to it, which is gonna help from you getting like a lot of water retention. And when I say that, women, don't worry, it's not gonna block your estrogen. It just blocks basically excess estrogen. Moving on down, we have avocado. Now, I've done told you about avocado. As you know, it's an omega-6, it's anti-inflammatory, and it has that PPAR, which results in a higher body heat, more fat burning. Then we move on to artichokes. It's a good prebiotic because when you're switching to a ketogenic diet, you're gonna have a whole new range of foods coming in, which is going to result in a whole new community of bacteria within your gut. Well, you give them this, since it's a good prebiotic fiber helps feed those and help them grow quicker. Now, if you don't like artichoke, you can also eat spinach. That's gonna have basically the same effect. It's just a different type of prebiotic fiber, but it's gonna give you the same benefits. And then you got berries, and we're talking about things like raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries. Make sure you try to get those organic. Those are highly sprayed crop. But usually on the daily basis, you can have about a fourth a cup of berries and be okay and it not kick you out of ketosis because berries are typically lower in sugar. The last one I have on this list is gonna be baby kale. The reason for baby kale is because unless you just like the texture of regular kale, then this is gonna be a lot easier for you to break down and digest, and actually it's gonna be higher in nutrients. And the same thing goes for the broccoli, baby kale, is going to give you higher nutrients. Now there are some other things on this list like baby spinach, arugula, and there's a lot of other cruciferous vegetables that you can have. The only thing I'd be careful of is the spinach, whether it's full grown or baby spinach, because spinach is typically higher in oxalates. In short, oxalates can cause a lot of problems in the body, and it's better if you try to keep your oxalate intake down. Now we're gonna shift gears over to nuts and seeds, and please know if you're consuming any nuts or seeds, just go with a small handful because typically even the ones that are lower in this, well, they're still in it, and that's anti-nutrients. Nuts and seeds typically have at least a small amount of those. There are some that ain't that bad, so let's go ahead and take a look at those though. First on this is gonna be pecans. Now these are high fat, good omega-3 content, and we have walnuts. Now walnuts are the highest in healthy omega-3s out of all these. Then you have macadamia nuts. Now these are very low carb, and these are the lowest in phytic acid. Phytic acid is an anti-nutrient that binds up your minerals to where you can't absorb them and get the benefits from them like you're supposed to. That's why macadamia nuts are a good choice, because out of all these nuts, they're gonna be the lowest in phytic acid. Then we have pili nuts. Now, you may not be able to find these except at like specialty stores like maybe Whole Foods or Costco or something like that. But actually, these are at the Walmart in my location. I don't know about yours. I kind of had to look for them. They're down on the bottom shelf. But the cool thing about these are the highest fat and the lowest carb nut on this list. So those will be excellent for hitting your keto macros. Next up is almonds. The skins of almonds, the brown stuff, those are extremely high in the phytic acid I was talking about, and they're also really high in omega-6. So honestly, if you're gonna have almonds, keep it to a minimum. And that also goes for almond butter. While the almond butter won't have obviously the skins in it, it's still gonna have that higher omega-6 content. So you just wanna be careful consuming a bunch of that stuff. I went through a bout when I first started doing this with having too much nut butters, and it did actually stall me out due to inflammation from too many omega-6s. Now the last one, once again, is optional because it's macadamia nuts, but macadamia nut butter. I have had this, it is really good, has all the same benefits as macadamia nuts I talked about, but it is very expensive. One quick mention to something I didn't put on this list is chia seeds. Chia seeds are fairly high in omega-3s, and they actually have a good filling effect due to the high fiber content that they have. Now this is going to be the other foods, or the miscellaneous section if you will, because there's some things that I want to point out with these. But first up is going to be avocado oil mayo. If you're buying mayonnaise and it's made with canola oil or soybean oil or corn oil, and that's typically going to be the first ingredient, run the other direction. Put it back on the shelf and go for something that's made with avocado oil or olive oil, because canola, soy, and corn oils are very inflammatory. And I've done mention inflammation stopping weight loss a few times already, so you don't want to go for that. Make sure it's olive or avocado oil in those. And also check and make sure they haven't added a bunch of sugar to it. There's a few different brands. I know Primal Kitchen makes it, Sir Kensington's, and there's one by Better Body Foods. That's the one I personally use, and I get that from Walmart. Next is gonna be guacamole. Once again, just check the ingredients list, make sure there's no nasty oils or added sugars. Then you got canned coconut milk. Now, I've used this a lot of times in place of heavy whipping cream. If you're lactose intolerant or dairy bothers you really bad, canned coconut milk has almost the same consistency, and you can actually replace things that require heavy whipping cream with canned coconut milk. Then next up is coffee and tea. You can have those on keto, but just obviously don't be adding sugar to your coffee or your tea. And if you're adding any creamers, make sure there's no added sugars or garbage in them either. Then you have stevia, monk fruit, erythritol. There's also allulose and a few others that you can use on keto. But what these are is they're sweeteners that are not coming from sugar. They're not gonna spike your insulin up real high and kick you out of ketosis. Now, my personal favorite out of these is going to be actually something I buy called PYURE, which is a mix of stevia and erythritol. But those would be a great replacement to put like in your coffee or tea if you're used to adding sugar in them. Now, next up we have pork rinds. Pork rinds are great because they are actually collagen protein, because they're the skin. They're the skin of the animal. And our skin and hair is made of collagen protein, so it's good to consume that on keto. One thing to look out for though in pork rinds, and I see this a lot, especially in the flavored ones, is MSG. Monosodium glutamate. Now, this stuff has a lot of other bad effects, but just know it can spike your insulin up to 300%. That's the last thing you want when you're doing keto. You want to keep your insulin levels as low as possible so that you can burn that body fat off of you. Next on the list is beef jerky. Now, this is a very sketchy one. I have a hard time finding beef jerky that don't have a bunch of added sugars. Even just the ones that maybe say something like prime rib, if you turn over and look on the back, they've added a ton of sugar to it to make it taste better so that you'll buy more of it. And also, I see a lot of MSG in these. So if you're buying beef jerky, just look out for the ingredients list and check it over thoroughly. Then as far as spices go, there's tons of them. You know, you see them all over the shelves in the grocery stores. You've got garlic, ginger, cinnamon, cayenne. One good one is turmeric. Turmeric actually has some good anti-inflammatory benefits, but one thing just to look out for, if you're buying something that's like a spice mix, you know, it's got this, that, and the other, it might be called some kind of barbecue rub or whatnot, check and see if it has any added sugar or MSG. Those are also notorious for having a lot of added sugar and MSG in them. I know I keep talking about those, but that's the thing. When you're doing keto, you need to become a food label detective and really know how to look out for this stuff. One little bonus thing I wanted to add to this that I didn't originally have on this list is going to be a ketogenic milkshake by Keto Science. This comes in chocolate and vanilla, and it is absolutely great. Now, the best way to make this stuff is get you some almond milk. Make sure there's no sugar added. Make sure it's 0 sugar almond milk. Mix that with it. Add a little bit of the keto sweetener, and specifically the PYURE I was talking about. You can add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of that. Shake it up in like a blender bottle or something, and it's absolutely delicious. And that would be something great for if you're on the go and you're needing to keep it keto. Now that you got the food list for the stuff that you need while doing keto, make sure you check out the video up top here. This is going to be a complete guide on how to actually start the ketogenic diet over a 4-week period. But guys, keep it keto, keep it healthy, and I'll see you next week.